Another episode of A Warrior Spirit, where we let your inner warrior out to the light. Today, I'm honored to be here with Mary Wood. Do you prefer Mary Gilligan Wood or Mary Wood?
Mary Wood is my name.
Mary Wood. She is a high school teacher in Winston-Salem, and she has also been working with disabled children, right?
Yep, students with special education, students with disabilities. Yeah.
So, Mary, what got you that? Now it's hard enough to be a high school teacher, but what got you into wanting to do with disabilities? Where'd that journey start?
So growing up, I was, I fell through the cracks. And at 10 years old, my father ended up getting cancer and dying within a year. And, that trauma on top of an undocumented learning disability, I'm a slow reader and I have a processing delay that fell through the cracks. I had an epiphany during this whole year span between I was 10 and 11, I was in 6th grade, that I knew I wanted to help kids. I didn't know how young of kids or how old of kids, but through the years, I figured out that I work best with high school students and meeting them where they're at with their journey and helping advocate for them and what they need to make that transition to adulthood successfully.
Now, from 10 years old to the ability to actually be in the high school system, that's a long journey. What was it like during those years to learn that that's where your path was and what you wanted to do?
It was hard. It was really hard. I have a twin sister, and she ended up being my voice. I was very much the quiet, invisible student. We were both bullied in middle school, very bad. We were bullied at school by women, by girls, and by boys. And then when we went home into our household, it was very toxic. We ended up bullied and beat up by our siblings. My mom failed to protect us, which led me not to find a voice for a long time. I just took it out in sports, and trying to reach out to my coaches and guidance counselors. I was met with, they said I wouldn't amount to anything. I wasn't college ready because my grades were so low. New York State had Regents exams. I failed every single one of them. I failed it pretty bad. So I just got a local diploma for New York State and I went to community college on my own because my friends were. I followed with what they did. They were doing it. I didn't see why I couldn't do it. I just had to learn differently. I had to put the extra time in studying, do colored notes. I'm very visual and hands-on. So I had to do study groups. I had to figure out ways that I would retain the material. And that's what I do. And I bring that into the school system that I teach with the kids. Right.
So you actually had counselors tell you you'll never amount to anything?
Yeah. I wanted to be, my dad was an architect. I found out later, mechanical engineer, but anyway, I just remember him doing drafts and stuff. So I wanted to do that. I loved floor plans. I loved creating things. I loved building things. And I minored in art. I ended up going into drafting classes and stuff, and I was getting A's on it. And I went into a technical school right out of high school, and the dean of the school said I was really a natural for architecture, but he gave me an ultimatum. He told me that I needed to stop playing sports. Well, that was my lifeline since I was 5 years old. I wasn't going to give sports up. So I made a lateral move and went into psychology at that point. And it was a natural fit for me. And that's when I realized, going back to when I was 10, the experience that I had with my trauma, and just sitting there and knowing that if I can help any student in this situation, I'm going to. So
at 10 years old, you're still a long ways from high school and getting that journey. What was your saving grace in your epiphany? Because you're also an empath and an intuitive, and I know that is a healer by nature,
Mhm.
but you're also highly aware and highly sensitive to the world around you.
Yeah.
So you've lost your father, you've been bullied at home by the rest of your family, you're being bullied at school,
Mhm.
and you're feeling all these things from the world around you.
Right.
What became your lifeline besides sports? Like, was there a mentor? Was there a person?
Mm-mm.
You just dug
My
within
twin
and
sister. Yeah, I detached literally. Like my twin sister and I, we leaned on each other. I mean, her and I both say that if it wasn't for each other, we wouldn't have made it, and we wouldn't be this well-adjusted, giving what we grew up in. I don't know if you know ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences.
no.
That's a study that had been done through the 90s. Well, this was pre that, and we were going through. We had like 8 or 9 of the criteria when you do the ACEs stuff. I didn't find this out till years later, but my sister and I looked at each other and we said, "We're getting we're getting out at 18. We can endure for that long," and we did. And then once we turned 18, we graduated from high school and we got out. I went downstate. I'm from New York, upstate New York. I went to community college and then 2 years, and then I transferred to New York City. And then after there, that 9/11 happened while I was in college in New York City. And then after that, I moved to North Carolina.
So at the age of 10, you made a pact with your sister that said,
Mhm.
we're going to endure this. We're going to be our
Yeah.
lifeline for 8 years, and then we're out of here. Where'd your
Yeah.
sister go?
North Carolina.
So this bond that was between you
Yeah.
two, you split and went your separate ways?
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, it wasn't all rainbows, and butterflies. Her and I were twins. So of course we had, sibling rivalry, we had fights, there was boys stuff, so we went to separate colleges. Because I changed my major, she was a semester ahead of me. And she had found a job in North Carolina, and I had graduated in December, and she said, "Why don't you come visit? Like just vacation." And I'm like, okay. And so I did. And then within a month of me visiting North Carolina, I found a job at a wilderness camp working with at-risk boys, juvenile delinquents. And I loved it. I was working 160 hours a week, going on canoe trips in the wilderness and learning how to behavioral modification, basically, like on the job. And I was such a natural for it that I just, over the next 4 years, I did that. And then I started working with girls in group homes, became a social worker. And then I realized, they're still not getting the education. They're not being advocated for in public education. And that's when I made the switch to push into public ed, knowing my background with being an empath, being intuitive, knowing my trauma I grew up in, and how to help advocate for the students while they were in school and they weren't being listened to, or felt like they didn't have a voice. So
So how are you using your experience to be their voice? What makes that valuable and different?
so over the years, I can recognize when a crisis happens in school, when it starts escalating. I immediately diffuse the situation. I immediately pull out the bully, pull out the most violent person in the classroom, whatever situation that happens. The classes that I'm assigned to, over the years, it's been different subjects. I've gone into science classes, social studies classes. I'm in math, and I've done English. I've done them all. So I immediately de-escalate the situation prior to any type of offense, like fight, altercation, violence. We've had riots. I mean, and I could just feel the energy going into the building in the morning, and I would let administration know. I was like, "You need to make sure you check on this person." And 9 times out of 10, it was gang involvement.
So you're
And
not
so,
in the suburbs, you're in the
oh no,
heart
I'm
of
inner city.
inner
Hmm.
city.
Yeah, yeah. And my coworkers have told me, "Mary, like your package, what you bring, like God's planted you in a specific situation, and no one knows who you are until they see you in action." I said, "You're absolutely right." I
So
said,
you're
so.
taking your life experiences and
Mhm,
now you're using that in
mhm,
adverse conditions
Yep.
to help others not have to endure what you've done.
Right. And I've purposefully been re-traumatized for 20 years, working in the field that I grew up traumatized. And my brother, back when I was 10, my brother was making homicidal threats to my mother, to us. He ended up going into a psychiatric center. So that was the drive for me to go into work with people, at-risk kids, basically, to try to understand him a little bit better because he would never talk about it. Him and I actually ended up having a really good relationship prior to his death at 37. He ended up having heart failure, but so yeah, that was my motivation.
So I talked about this with one of my other guests, the ripple effect,
Mhm.
and how what we do in one moment, plays out in others. Have you had some of these kids come back after graduation? And
Yes. So funny. So interesting that you asked that. I went to a basketball game last week with my daughter, and that's definitely different, introducing my daughter to my work world. And we were sitting there, because I homeschool my children after my divorce. This is a separate thing. I ended up homeschooling them, then COVID happened. But so I was sitting in the stands, and these two students that I had on my special ed caseload from the rival school. I've taught at both inner city schools, in Winston-Salem. One was Reynolds High School, and now at Parkland. Anyway, so these two students come up the stands. They've graduated 3 years ago, and they immediately recognized me, and they said, "Miss Wood, oh my God." And they ran down the bleachers, and one girl hugged me and started crying and like, "We're so good to see you," and stuff. So yeah, it's happened this last year. I've seen them out at their jobs, Krispy Kreme, Bojangles, the grocery store, and just seeing them. And I'm so proud of them. And McDonald's even. And I say, "You guys graduated. I'm so happy for you." And they're like, it's just the success stories. And that's confirmation for me that I know that I'm planting seeds. I've been planting seeds within this community because my kids are growing up here, that it's re-energizing me to keep doing what I'm doing.
are any
Uh,
of them going on to either college or other things?
yes, yep. I saw one girl, she's actually back in school, and I went into Walgreens, and she said, "Miss Wood, can we friend each other on Facebook? Because I need tutoring help." I said, "We absolutely can." I said, and that's why I'm trying to do support for young adults transitioning, because they're ended up graduating from the high school, and then they need that support at college level.
So we're both part of a bigger community, you and
Mhm.
I. That's how we know each other.
Yep.
And we're both a part of doing some neurofeedback. Uh,
Mhm.
how do you see the neurofeedback benefiting the position you're currently in?
Oh, so now, okay, so COVID's really impacted
Mhm.
the middle grades, and now it's the freshmen. So we're in year one, going into year two after COVID. And what we're all talking about is that it's going to take 4 years within the school system for the students to become stabilized, because right now it's a mess. You can tell the trauma. They feel unsafe. You can tell how fidgety they are, how inattentive they are, how disrespectful they are. And so I know that if I can figure out a way to bring in neurofeedback to reset or recalibrate their neurons and biofeedback, that they would be able to get through what they need to get through to retain, to learn what we're teaching them. Because right now, they're not ready to learn the material, the curriculum teachers are charged with having to present by the end of the year. Um, it's a stark difference. Like, I'm in regular education. My special ed kids are supposed to be like 2-3 grade levels behind grade level. Daryl, they can't multiply. They're back at 5th grade level. And I'm not just talking about my special ed kids, I'm talking about the whole classroom.
Wow.
And and we're all seeing it in all different classes. That's just not in special education. So there's definitely a significant need for neurofeedback to be in the schools, or some type of social emotional learning to be in trauma-informed care, to be in public education.
So some of your past trauma, how do you see that as being helpful for what you're currently facing with where these kids are today?
So my, there's a parallel for sure. My classroom, I intentionally set up being a safe space for any kid that needs to relax, to calm down, to refocus, to reset, to go back into the classroom where there's 30, 32, 35 kids, where, you know, when teenagers get amongst their peers, they want to posture, they get embarrassed, you know. So I'm working with the guidance counselor actually at my school and they understand. They said, no, Mary, you're doing great. I do coaching with them to get them ready to learn. That's like an extra caveat to my job just because of my background. And I know what I bring to the table at the school that I work at.
And that's directly related to the experiences you had as a child.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I intuitively go in and I can tell. I always go up to the quiet kid to make sure, check in with them every day. How are you doing? Hey, how's it going? And I figured out that, you know, at some point talk therapy doesn't work. You have to get through and do action and go through it through positive psychology and get them engaged. And so I bring out my coloring books, I bring out my stress balls, and they gravitate towards my stuff, like towards my fidgets, towards anything that'll calm them down, to get them to settle down, settle their brains down, to calm down, to refocus. And then I bring it back. Okay, you know, this is what you're asked to do. You know, let's figure out a way. I know it's not going to all get done today, but let's try step one. And that's the other thing I do too, is I do step by step. So they know it's achievable chunks that they feel accomplished that they can do after.
And I said this on a previous broadcast. There's a difference between being positive and being toxic positive.
Yep.
You know, positive is hope and a solution forward. Toxic positivity is just sunshine and rainbows, and we're just gonna hope our way. So it sounds like you're using the positive in the right non-toxic way to give them hope. And as long as they still have hope, they're willing to do the work to get out of where they want to go. I think one of the things I tell my clients is that, and I think this is how you're helping your students. My goal with my clients is to make their scab into a scar, because if it's a scab, you're still picking at it and you're still hurt by it. But once it becomes a scar, it just becomes part of your story.
Right.
Like I have this scar on my neck from 3 fusion surgeries, right? But I can no longer pick at it. It can no longer hurt me. Now it's just part of my story. And that's what I try to get my clients to learn, is we're going to work together enough to make that scab into a scar. And it sounds like that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to heal their trauma.
And change their mindset, because they are defeated. They come in with, I can't do this. I'm not gonna do this. And I'm in math. So in math specifically, there's more extra frustration because of the deficits, and it's skill building every year. So when COVID hit, you know, I mean, they can't multiply, right? So they feel like they can't. So I start off with recognizing that frustration. I individually go around and encourage them quietly, and aside to me and my co-teacher doing it classroom. But it's taken a lot front loading, but I've seen the payoffs at the end. Like, you put the time in now, and they're going to, you never know when the seed starts to grow. So that's what I do every day.
You've been in your school system long enough. Have you considered going to your school district or your superiors and offering to create a specific class or program that will, because your students are also other teachers' students. And the other teachers aren't as equipped as you are to get through to them. So have you considered putting together a program that specifically does what you do, but make it one class so that they're learning those skills? And even thought just dawned on my head. Teaching it to the teachers as well.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I need help formulating the structure. But yeah, I mean, me and the guidance counselor actually this year we were talking about it, because basically what I did years ago, back in 2007, was I took the guidance curriculum, North Carolina guidance curriculum, and I embedded it in my behavior emotional teaching class. And and over time the school system went away from those type of classes. But me and the guidance counselor were talking of adding, because I told her about my passion of positive psychology and neurofeedback and the guidance curriculum and how to embed that, because that's the missing link of what they need to get through post-COVID. So yeah, I would love to. I have an open dialogue with my principal to figure out how to navigate that conversation. But yeah, just coming up with a structure for the class, and then a program for help teaching other teachers. But the reason I came back to the district, because I moved back to New York last 2 years. So I'm back in the district after 2 years of being away. And one of the reasons I came back to the district is because of the fact that they included positive climate culture coach. They included social emotional learning curriculum. I don't know what program they're using, but at the district level, those two things are new. And so I'm really energized to see how the district in the next couple of years are going to implement that with fidelity.
So a couple questions off of that.
Mhm.
How old are your daughters or your children?
My daughter's 13 and my son is 12.
So how are you using all of what you learned in the classroom to better equip them? Because they're the friends of these children. So they can also have an influence, right?
Yeah.
So how are you imparting that down to your children?
Well, that was a really good question.
I'm allowed
So
one.
yeah, so this brings me to second part of my story. I went through a very toxic divorce in 2018, where it impacted my kids very emotionally, where they were in therapy and they were recommended to be pulled out for homeschool because of their emotional stuff. And so since 2018, I have been teaching my kids social emotional learning to heal themselves with the divorce that me and their father were going through. On top of organic learning, because every day they're learning, right? So whatever they are interested in, they learn. And I encourage that. So they are at a point now. My daughter's a little bit more further with her social emotional. She's very aware and she's very emotionally intuitive. She's an intuitive too. She's highly sensitive. And she's talked to me about we just had a conversation today about going back into public education. However, she's more mature now. She's way more mature and ahead of her peers. She would be in 8th grade right now, where I think going back into public ed, she would not be able to handle the immaturity. So we're talking about early college with her. But I'm preparing them, being aware of their highly sensitive, emotional intelligence nature, because they get it, honestly, they both do.
So are they as traumatized by the divorce as they were, or are they healing from that?
They are healing. My daughter's healing. My daughter's living with me. My son still chooses to be with his dad. So I don't know the effects that he has been traumatized with that until I can get him away. But my daughter is seeing it. She's seeing that. Daryl, I can't believe some of the conversations we're having. My daughter is like, she knows about the narcissistic patterns. She's seeing it. And she told me the other day, she said, Mommy, I think you need to stop interacting with any toxic family members. She said, because that is a guilt trip and that love bombing. And I'm like, I am so proud of you to know this at 13, where it took me 40. I was 40. This was like, a couple years ago. I was like, Madison, this is amazing. And I was so proud of her when she said that. I said, So my son, he understands, but he's a little bit younger, and being a boy, he's a little bit more immature, but he just wants to play,
Yeah.
stuff.
Well,
So
the difference is that when we make it a safe environment, and because and I'm older than you considerably, but intuitive, empath, spiritual, all of those
yeah.
things were taboo growing up. You
Mhm.
didn't have a safe environment to talk about it. You didn't have it front and center in a lot of different places. And the
Right.
more we make it safe for our children to express what they're feeling and not it
Yeah.
be, crazy,
Yeah.
the more equipped they are to handle it. Like in my business with my coaching, I always say it's where the woo meets the work, because it's not just, hey, we're doing this
Yeah.
spiritual stuff, right?
Right.
You actually still have to do the work that's in touch with all that.
Right.
So when we allow our children that same path, it brings a vastly different, child into our house.
Yeah. And I agree with you on that. I know I'm breaking generational curses because of
Mhm.
the conversations me and my daughter are having, where I did not feel comfortable or safe to even have with my mother at all. And I told her that today, and she's aware. And I told her, I said, you were so aware and open-minded that that is going to do you wonders in the world. I said, I want you to just understand, though, that you're going to come across people that aren't open to those conversations. Because she is so open and absorbing everything right now. And I couldn't be more proud of her. At the same time, I'm recognizing that she is still 13, and that
Mhm.
I'm parenting her for a post-COVID world, right? And so
Mhm.
she, and I'm making sure, and I told her, I said, that's what I'm doing, Madison. I'm planting seeds with your peers that you're going to be interacting with in this community as they get older. And I know I'm not going to reach all of them.
Yeah.
I know that, I'm doing the ones that are receptive, and I plant those seeds. And the only other way I know how to do it is to show up consistently.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
it doesn't,
that's where the ripple effect comes, because you
uh,
plant the one seed and then it ripples out, even if that seed starts in your own house.
right.
But it's also important to um, not only give them the platform to embrace their gift, but show them how to protect the boundaries of that gift,
Right.
because if you are openly and embrace it, yay, that's great,
Mhm.
but it causes a lot of harm because you realize that not everyone
Right.
has that same gift, not everyone has that
Mhm.
same love and care, and it opens you up to
Right.
be hurt even better. So it go
That
ahead.
was good. No, that was good. I needed to hear that, because
Yeah.
that's the next step with some of the kids, is teaching them healthy boundaries.
Yeah, and that's the key word, healthy boundaries, right?
Mhm.
So how
Yep.
many siblings do you have, or did you have?
So I'm one of six.
Okay.
Well, seven. One had died when she was a baby, but I'm my brother. I had an older brother. 1 year. He was 18 months older than me. Then me and my twin sister, and then I have three younger sisters.
And so you were bullied by your younger siblings?
Yes. So what had happened was, when my dad, he was in the Marine Corps,
Mm.
and he was a disciplinarian. And so when he got sick, he had pancreatic cancer from Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam War. There was a direct link. Anyway, so they gave him 3 months to live. So he deteriorated pretty fast. We had just moved from Millington, Tennessee to New York within this year that he got diagnosed. And it was chaotic. My mom could not, she wasn't the disciplinarian at all. So as soon as my brother recognized that my dad ended up having to go into the hospital because it was too much for him to die at home. My brother tried to be the man of the house, and everybody handled it differently. He ended up being very angry, and he took his anger out at my mom, and he did attempt to kill her. And I saved her life. And then at that point, he ended up going into a psychiatric hospital and then going into foster care, because my mom could not keep the five of us safe from him, because it was violent. He was, leading up to this episode, he was threatening us. we had counseling. He was verbally threatening us like this, and in the therapist's office, and the therapist didn't see the nonverbal threats. And that's when I had my epiphany after one of the counseling sessions. And this is probably, if I ever talk about this, there was 5, 6 kids, all under the age of 12 to 4 years old, sitting in an hour-long therapy session, not playing, not saying any words, keeping our heads down. And the therapist wasn't even talking. It was the most awkward hour I have ever endured. And my brother, if I looked up at my brother, he was going like this. So after that session, I sat right before I got in the car. The universe hit me, and I knew at that point that I will never, like, if I could help it to help other kids in this situation have a voice, they will not live and suffer like this. So after my brother left the house, my younger sisters, they were 8, 6, and 4. My younger sisters, as they were getting older, they started the aggression, the violence towards me and my twin sister, because we were 120 pounds at 5'10", so we were underweight, we were super skinny, and they had bigger builds, so we were easily pushed around and easily bullied. And because Bridget and I leaned on each other, we knew we were smart enough to we didn't make waves, we didn't fight back. I absorbed the getting beat up. I absorbed everything.
And your mom either wasn't aware or didn't?
No, my mom was struck with grief. She still is to this day. She refused to deal with her grief. So what I remember of my mom, I became the parent at that point. I became my mom's parent. She was crying every time we turned around. She would threaten to leave. It was a bad, sad situation. My mom self-isolated. Looking back now, I think that she had pushed everybody away because she was hurt and lonely and grieving, and didn't know how to reach out. She leaned on her faith, very, very Catholic, but at the same time, she's dealing with now her unresolved grief from 1991.
So 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And is your relationship with her getting any better?
So it was a good relationship up until when I moved in with her. When COVID hit, she had called me that she didn't recognize the culture. She didn't understand the masks. It was an alien culture to her. She was very more self-isolated. And so we had a concern that she was getting dementia. So I made the decision to move home to help reinstate her doctor's appointments, to help provide that support for her. In 2 years, she resisted me. She ended up assaulting me in October. And that was when I had finally said, I'm done. I walked away because I realized that she will never get the help that she wants, that she needs. She's very, she's going through a lot of mental health, undiagnosed mental health stuff, that my twin sister is up there, and she is slowly trying to get her help that she needs. And I told her that she will never see me again until she gets help, because I can't be around that toxic anymore. So
it's a very challenging situation for sure.
yeah.
Outside of pouring yourself into your work and your children, where do you, and obviously you're not playing sports anymore, so where do you find your release outside of that environment?
So I am joining the YMCA to swim, because swimming is very cathartic for me. Me and my daughter are in therapy. I have a couple really good friends that I talk to, and then I have the online community to making sure I reach out and stay connected.
I think it's important to, I mean, the Unleashed You Now family, the Warrior Spirit family, the other communities that you're a part of. I think it's key element to stay connected to like-minded, positive environments to help bring you through all that.
Yeah.
So if you were to tell a stranger right now who's going through what you went through, who's not a child in your system, what would you say to them to give them their lifeline, to give them hope, and to help them out of where they're at?
Well, I would actually hold their hands and tell them they're not alone and that they can do this, because it's something that I didn't hear. I had to tell it to myself. That I know right now may seem impossible, but you will get through this and you can do this because you've done it before. And I would basically say that they're not alone in the dark.
And if they, through their own limiting beliefs and doubts, didn't believe you, where would you direct them or guide them to help them overcome that hurdle? Because saying that to somebody
Right.
is, it's okay, but they have to believe it
Mhm.
and really do some of that. So how would you get them there?
W- Well, it depends on their, well, it depends on the reaction, but I would, tell them, or talk to them about different resources that are out there, wherever their community is, but, the online Unleash You Now community. But if anything, that I would be a resource if or when they're ready. I mean, it didn't have to be now, but whenever they're ready to reach out, that there are people in their life that care about them and that they want to help them.
Are there
That's
specific agencies or places nationwide that people can reach out to for that kind of
well,
help?
yeah. There's the National Suicide Hotline. There's NAMI. There's any of their local mental health associations. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. It's like 811 or 411 or something for mental health now. I can't remember what it
I
is.
think it's 811.
Is it? Yeah. So yeah, and I actually, the funny thing is when I moved home, I was working in the local chapter for the Mental Health Association back in Binghamton, New York. And so yeah, like I just have to re-embed that in my community here. But I think it's very positive to have therapists and work on mental health. I think it's healthy.
Mhm.
It's like going to the doctor. I mean, so.
Absolutely. So what's the next step for Mary? What's your next journey?
So my next step, is to find a master's program, because I definitely want to pursue getting my psychology master's or doctorate in either positive psychology, developmental psychology, and neurofeedback. I'm looking at programs right now, but just continuing to teach, and I definitely want to working on getting my story out there and writing a book. I get really nervous in front of people to talk, but I'm working through that. And I think that's just because I'm very self-aware and self-conscious. So if I can navigate that, then my anxiety, then I can definitely talk. I can talk in front of students in classes all day long. It's just being vulnerable and telling my story, because it is very dark.
Yeah, I think there's pieces of your story that you still can
Yeah.
touch on. We got to get you to that scab, to the scar, so that it doesn't hurt you when you're telling it.
Yeah.
I think that's an important piece. When I got my master's in psychology, I did my thesis on how the music affects the brain and how it helps heal the brain. Have you thought of implementing music into your classroom or your programs?
No, not well. I've thought of using it personally. I love music and I love frequencies and how that actually resets and is very calming, but didn't think about how to introduce sound into the classroom, but that's a good idea.
Yeah, it'll have a profound effect on your
Mhm.
students. From what I learned from my program, one of my professors actually used to play very softly classical music in his classroom all day. because it has a calming effect on the brain, but it also has a creative effect where your retention's higher and his students' scores were vastly higher than any of the other professors, simply because of the classical music opened up that pathway for the learning to be retained. So then you could do better and more creative in the classroom. So
That's a good idea, because I do the coloring, because that's what got me through. I mean, to be honest, because you had asked me what got me through those years from 10 to 18, but it was, I literally colored coloring books it was meditative and relaxing way, in addition to sports, and I still do it. Like, so, and my students will be like, oh, let's do that. That's relaxing. I said, is absolutely. So I turn the lights off and we just color, to get through some of it. But
yeah, there's a ton of new adult coloring books for that
Mhm.
very reason. So while
Yeah.
you're implementing that, just turn on it doesn't have to be loud and audible, just
Yeah.
so that it's hitting that frequency. And I think you'll find a difference in their
Well,
behavior.
thank you for that.
Yeah, well,
That's
one
actually,
psychology person to another.
yeah. Actually very helpful.
Are there any imparting words you want to say before we say goodnight?
No, this has been fun. And
Well,
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yes, I appreciate you joining me tonight. And again, you're one of the people that I think embody a true warrior spirit. We're going to
Well,
take your message so it can be a
mhm.
survival guide for somebody else.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, thank you for joining me tonight.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Bye.